So, quick introductions. We have here with us Hussein Fazleabas, who is the Managing Director of Perigon Lanka, a preeminent engineering, cost management, and project management firm in Sri Lanka. We got Rengy John, who's the Managing Director of Wilson Associates, a major interior design firm from Singapore. And we got Mevan Gunatilleke, who is the Executive Director of Sanken Overseas, a major construction cum development company here in Sri Lanka. And they, of course, have overseas business. So it is exciting times for this region in terms of hospitality and tourism. It is estimated that over 40% of luxury hotels that opened this year opened in Asia Pacific. Particularly this region is booming. The sentiment is extremely positive, and we all sensing it in more ways than one. And what better way to have these panelists to talk about some of the real challenges that this sector faces in terms of delivery, execution, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to start with Mevan, and this is the big one, and I hope I get your attention with this. They finished a hotel in Maldives in 14 months, a 120-room hotel in 14 months. How did you do it? Give us some glimpses of the challenges and what it took.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So I represent the Sanken group. So we are primarily a construction company, also involved in developments in real estate and to a small extent in leisure. So the hotel you're talking about is the Amari Resort in Maldives, which is managed by Onyx. It's a coincidence that all the partners of this development are here. Peter is here from the operating company, and we even have the designer Isabel. She was also around. So going on to your question, I firmly believe that projects in general, at least when it comes to real estate, are delayed not by what most of the people think, which is they think something to do with engineering or with material or with procurement, but that's not the case. Projects are delayed by decision making. It is purely on decisions. So if you can come up with a mechanism which can enable quick decision making, then that directly leads to the quick completion of projects. Now, when it comes to leisure, it becomes even more complicated because there are so many players involved trying to make decisions, and this process is never streamlined. Now, for example, if you talk about hotel developments, now you get people who have their entire life have been making fried eggs or sausages. They come, and when the project comes, they become an engineer, suddenly. Or you get a person who have been arranging the buffet counters or ice carvings, and then suddenly he has gone up the ranks and he becomes an architect, right? So then these professional matters should be left to the professionals. So because of this issue, this traditional system we use for contracting or project management strategy fails in leisure because these parties cannot be managed. Now, if I just touch up on that.
Sure.
Now, if you look at a conventional project management, which is used in 95% of the projects, especially in leisure. Now, so a developer comes, first of all, he assigns a consultant, and then the consultant then appoints, through a tender process or not, appoints a contractor. Contractor appoints subcontractors, subcontractor appoints suppliers, and that's how the system goes. But in this process, what happens is the risk of the developer is transferred from top to bottom. So the developer transfers his risk to the consultant, saying, I need a hotel built in 2 years with this amount of money. Then the consultant also doesn't absorb it. He transfers his risk to the contractor, saying, okay, you have to finish this on this time. If you don't finish, then there's a delay charge, there's a penalty. The contractor also doesn't want to take the risk. He transfers it to the subcontractors. And at the end, you have a group of carpenters working on a villa in some room, having no idea of the ROI, which is what the developer wants at the end. And he's the one who's absorbing the risk at the end of the day. So some people might find it a bit too radical, but what we suggest is that this risk should be assigned other way around. It should be assigned from bottom to top. So the developer who has enough courage to invest money, he should also have enough courage to absorb the risk. You should not try to translate all the way down. Now, this is a system that was successfully used for the Heathrow Terminal 5 project, which I was sort of involved in. And what the BAA did was that they had about 60 contractors for the airport development. They bore the risk of the entire development. So there was no penalty clauses for the contractors. There were no delay charges for the contractors. This was all managed by the developer. So one way of doing this is that you can appoint a turnkey contractor, or you can appoint sort of a client representative who does not necessarily have to come from a construction background, but he can stay in between the developer and the project manager. So that the project manager, I think Hussein can touch upon it, can do an independent role. Because otherwise the consultant becomes a rep of the client, and that also leads to issues. And this is also a way to avoid, like sometimes you have hotel owners whose daughter recently decorated her room and suddenly she becomes an interior designer, you know. And so you need to avoid this. And to avoid this, the only way is that the developer has to absorb the risk and say, okay, I'm giving you this much money to finish the project on this time, right? But if you project it earlier, I can give you an incentive. Right? And things like political risk concern in the economy, these things also the developer should absorb. Because if you try to translate to the contractor or to the project manager, they will always price the risk, and then your price goes up. So I think just without going too much details, the answer is that you try to absorb.
Interesting point. I think you made some interesting points, and maybe we come back to those points a little later. Rengy, I'll come to you next. So, and similar to what you said, I mean, enough has been said and talked about having the designers integrated into the project through the life cycle versus just being designers at the early stage, etc., and then getting off. What's your view on this? I mean, should they be involved in the procurement, construction side of the project, or should they just disengage once the design is done, because that's where the value add is made?
I think it's a very good question. So just a quick overview. You know, Wilson Associates, we are primarily interior designers for hotels. So hopefully I speak for some of the designers around the table here. It's always good to bring the entire team very early on into the project because the value that is built at that point of time can be carried through the project. And if you are bringing the right team to the table, you can really get the best out of them. Far too many projects have had delays, have changes in direction when you bring in, I think, good consultants downstream. There are many projects which we have got involved that we have sat down with both the operator and the client and said, look, there's a better way of looking at this. Our fundamental approach to a project is not just, you know, choosing the cushions and the fabrics on the curtains. It's actually seeing how we can bring more returns to the owner, uplifting the brand's image of the product. You know, working with the operator. So you've all got two clients. You know, the operator who wants us to you know, develop a project brand with them, and you've got the owner who's saying, I'm investing X amount of dollars. I want the maximum from that. Where's my revenue coming from? So the designer, we go in saying we need to bring these two together and we need to have a guest experience. So three parties we're looking at. If we get in early, we can work with the architect, with the developer to say, how do we space plan this place to bring in maximum revenue? If we come in late, the engineer said, well, sorry, you can't move that column, you can't move the walls, it's going to be too expensive, we can't do this, we can't do that. And then we are down to selecting the carpet and the chandelier, if we can afford it at that point. So there's really a lot of value we can bring up front, and I'm sure every designer here would say, every time we meet a client, just walking around the table here, throughout the conference, I'm saying, this is what we do, bring us on board early enough. There's an amazing amount of value. And I love what Mevan's been saying. There's an opportunity of even working with a contractor in the design build opportunity for the right projects, and mitigating risk way up front. So I'm all for it.
But that's early stage. What about staying engaged through the construction or the procurement?
Absolutely. Means our brand is we stay committed throughout the project until the end of the project when you cut the ribbons, because it is quite normal that throughout the project conditions you need to make adjustments.
Right.
You need to seek quality control, brands change, economies rise and fall, and how do we adjust to that? So involvement throughout is important. Different models have come up. Many countries which we work in Japan, in Korea, even in Australia, they sometimes want to take that last phase of the work and pass it downstream to a local contractor. It works as long as you have the right people there for you. But when you work with international brands, like the Marriotts and the Ritz and the Four Seasons, they expect us to follow through. They expect us to make sure that brand standards are adhered to, the quality is adhered to. And again, that's where the right consultant brings the right value. So I would say bring the consultants on board as early as possible. Expect them to be on board as early as possible, but expect them to be at the end. Because the risks that Mevan spoke about, if we are not involved towards the end, how do you ensure you're getting what you spent your money on?
And stay on the table through the project.
Throughout the process.
Great.
I just think it's great.
Thanks. Hussein, I've got a big motherhood kind of a question for you. You are, as the project manager, of course, on many occasions are at the center of many disputes, disagreements, missing information. You have to arbitrate between different various parties, managing conflict and disagreements and so on and so forth through the currency of the project. How important do you think, several questions in my question, how important do you think is to be able to resolve those upfront? Can they be really resolved and anticipated upfront? And is there sufficient value? Can it be done? And so on and so forth.
Yeah, good afternoon. A very good question. I think we run through this on every project. I mean, everybody who's been on a project has run through this. And I think one of the key things that I think is essential is that there is a greater degree of trust built in between the developer and the project manager. You hire a project manager to run the project for you. You pay millions of dollars based on his signature. But sometimes when it comes to making the simplest of decisions, there is a little bit of a
mistrust,
hesitancy to actually take on board the advice that is given. And I think at the front end of projects, that is key. You always have this, what we term as optimism bias. You come into a project, a client comes in with very optimistic about the fact that this project can be done in a certain period of time, at a certain value, and after having analyzed the project, after having put in the value of whatever we've learned historically on projects, and providing that advice to the clients, sometimes you find that it's not really taken on board. It's like, sure, I understand what you're saying, but I still want it done in this time, and I still want it done at this price. So that I see as one of the primary risks. And going from there, the standard things, the risk analyses, the ensuring that The planning at the front end is spot on. You need to be able to understand the systems, the processes, the planning process, and ensure that those are shared between all the stakeholders. Mevan made a really good point in that, by the time it comes down the track, nobody knows what they're working for. And I think if we are able to pass on what our goals are very clearly to all the stakeholders across the board, starting with the owner, with the client, and then going through with all the other design consultants, the contractor, and everybody else who really have to come together to make it work, and make them understand exactly where we're going and how we're going to get there. I think that would mean a greater chance for success than otherwise.
But do you think there are early signs either which way, whether it's going to succeed or not succeed?
Absolutely. I mean, starting with what we heard earlier, the financing of the project, I mean, if you come into a project, get started without having all those little things in place, I mean, that's early warning sign immediately that there's going to be trouble. Either you're going to have major delays on the project, you're going to have major cost overruns on the project, you're going to have penalties that get applied, all kinds of things. So yes, I mean, I think you talked about having people on board early, and I think that's absolutely essential. Otherwise you again run the risk when the ID comes on board, architectural changes, structural changes, all these things that come into play can be mitigated if you look at it early. And those are really early warning signs. You need to look at that. And again, sometimes you find we are afraid to tell the client the way it is. You're worried about how that's going to be taken. But I think everybody is in the game together, and it's a team effort to make sure that it gets done. And as long as we pass that information on, I think the chances that the project will succeed are much greater, much greater.
Excellent, thank you. It's an interesting point. There's a PwC study which says 11, I think it's understated, 11% of projects have time and cost overruns because of scope creep, because someone came and changed. And there's an example I'm aware of where the CEO came in and made some small changes to the lobby and rearrangement of the reception and things like that, but it had such a massive effect on the overall project in terms of cost and timelines, and he was so startled to see that later on people didn't realize that that's the level of change or impact the project will have. So I'll ask you that question, Mevan, is what's your take on scope creep? I mean, you're both a construction company as well as a developer, so I think you're ideally placed to answer that question. How often do they happen? Can they be controlled? I think you gave the answer when you need to rein in some of the people who don't understand the business, but other than that, I mean, how prevalent is it? And can it be controlled? There are arguments to it saying, well, we are building a one of its kind product, so if it takes some more time or some more money, we're okay, but little do they realize that the some more can very quickly become a lot more.
Yeah, my personal view on this is that in general the leisure industry is a bit too overcomplicated, which is quite very simple. The stakeholders involved make it very complicated with these brand standards, with this and that, but at the end of the day, it's a very simple process. Now going into your question, now, for example, now you said about an owner wanting to move shift a column, right, and that having a big ripple effect towards the end. Now, there are so many guest reviews you see on TripAdvisor and on hotel websites. Have you ever seen any guest saying, I did not like the column there, or I did not like those steps on the left side, I prefer it if it was on the right side? No one makes a review, right? No one complains about those things.
Good point.
But at the end of the day, in your industry, that is the decision maker. Now, this is different from the other construction we do, like in infrastructure projects. It affects the national economy. Or if it's a port, it affects, there are There are serious projects. There are other stakeholders involved. But in leisure, the final decision maker is us when we are a guest in a hotel. So we make the final call. So if it doesn't affect us as a guest, it should not affect anyone else. So my simple answer is that. And for example, now if you take like a heart surgery, if you're doing a heart surgery, right? It's true that you will be paying for it, the developer in that sense, will be paying for the heart surgery. But you will not go and tell the doctor, I think you should do the cut from here, not from here. The doctor's mother-in-law will not come and say, you should give this medicine, not the one, or the daughter, whoever. So because people understand that that's a very professional business, professional act, so we should leave it to the professionals, the doctors. So similar treatment should be given to the development. I'm not talking about the operation side, but yes, even in operation, you should give it to the operators. So in the development phase, it should be given to the architects, interior designers, project managers. Once they're given a task, you should let them complete the project as it is. Because unless you're doing it for your pride, like you're building like a Taj Mahal, that is a different story. But if you're doing it for your return on investment as a pure developer, then once you give your scope to your appointed project manager, you should, keep off.
Which is the point Hussein made earlier as well.
Exactly.
That once you get professionals on board, then let them make the decisions.
Absolutely. I mean, you go through this long process of trying to appoint
the best in class,
the best professionals out there, and then you don't let them do their job, and that really becomes an issue.
I must say, I really like these guys.
So I'll ask you, Rengy, compliance, and there are various parts to this. What's your take on compliance in this overall scheme?
I think, again, we design hotels all over Southeast Asia and Middle East and China and as far as away as Europe, Moscow, Japan, Australia. This is not my portfolio or CV. I'm just saying, so we end up working in environments and locations where the requirements are very, very different. So we try to observe what we call an international standard, and we rely quite heavily on the local architects and engineers to work with us to refine that. And that's, again, coming on early enough, working through the planning and the codes to make sure we've addressed all the architectural needs. So with the right team and the right teamwork, I think the project manager's effort is to create the right teamwork, whereby there's communication, people are raising things early enough. So a big role of the project manager is bringing everybody together. And that really addresses the code compliance issues. As an interior design firm, yes, although I'm an architect by training, you understand an international level of expectations, but if you're operating in China, it's very different. You can't have certain things, and the regulation changes from province to province to province. It's not even consistent across the whole space. The regulation in working in the Maldives is totally different from somewhere else. So you rely quite heavily on local architects and engineers to advise you. So it's very important that they know that they should be advising a international consultant.
What about the brand compliance?
Brand compliance is, I think, easier. And maybe Mevan, doesn't agree with me. We've been working with all the brands, and to some degree, all of them have very similar requirements, with a few nuanced changes here and there. And if you've been in the industry, you've been doing project after project, there are certain standards you will follow. And I think they're really required, because they not just protect the integrity of the brand, but they actually protect the investment of the owner.
Right.
When we choose, carpet standards or fabric standards, they have to meet certain regulations, both fire compliance, rub tests, because you don't want to be changing this 6 months from now because the whole thing tore apart.
Sure.
So I think brand standards are vital to make sure your investment is safe, not just because the brand's being stubborn about, the operator's being stubborn about it. So it's second nature in hospitality design, and it's pretty sophisticated.
Good. Well, good. Thank you. I think it links back to what he said. So, Sen, just extending that discussion, the global versus local discussion. You got global brands and developers going into newer geographies where they have no idea or knowledge about those places or those countries or those cultures and so on and so forth. You got professionals working, such as yourselves, and a lot of other consultants come in with those brands and into newer locations, and we're building hotels. What's your take on how important is local information, local knowledge, etc.? What's the mix of global versus local when you're building hotels, essentially for an international traveler?
Okay, if it comes to project management, let's take that as an example. I think it's symbiotic. I think bringing in the knowledge, the technical knowledge, the systems, the processes that have been developed by the large international project management groups just helps to add to what the local project management can bring into the project. So putting both together really is critical when it comes to the what we call large projects or mega projects or whatever. The systems, the processes, like I said, the bench strength, the people. We in Sri Lanka, if you take Sri Lanka as an example, we are only just getting into projects that are of a certain magnitude. So if you haven't had the exposure in doing those projects previously, you can only serve to learn from the expertise that comes in from outside. So that's what that brings in. But where the locals can come in are, with regulatory advice, with advice on, we heard about sustainability, we heard about the use of local materials, the use of whatever resources that you can get, and the local partner will bring that part of it into it. Cost, for example. Sure. It's very difficult for somebody coming new from outside to try to understand all the little nuances that go into putting together a project cost. And I think the local input brings a lot of value into that. Language, there's always something lost in translation, and having somebody who's able to help put that together is always a big plus point. So I think it works both ways. I think it's a symbiotic relationship. It's also something that eventually should leave the local industry richer,
right,
and able to start performing on their own on things of this nature.
Yeah, and very clearly we've seen that happen in India. But you illustrated the project management example. I'm presuming that would apply to the designers and construction companies and operators and everyone.
Across the board. I think it's really a question of exposure. It's really a question of having seen certain things before and seen certain things having been done before. There is no lack of talent. If I talk for Sri Lanka, there is absolutely no lack of talent when it comes to everything from the aesthetics all the way through to the technical aspects of a project. But it's having seen things before. It's having been exposed to new technologies, new materials. We're starting to get there. We've been doing this now over the last maybe 5 years or a little bit more than that. Before that, everything was just at a standstill. I mean, we didn't do anything. There was nothing happening. There was, we built a few houses and that was it. But I think over the last 5 years, when things have started growing for us, I think the local expertise also starts to grow. There is, I mean, I guess we've got a bit of a happy problem in this country now, is that we don't have enough people to actually work. So we're importing expertise from outside, even to supplement our local resources, right through, I mean, from construction all the way to engineering to management. So I guess there is a lot of value to be added both ways.
Excellent. Thank you. Look, we have just about 4 minutes left, so if there are any questions in the audience, I'd love to take that. We can go on talking amongst ourselves. I have several questions to ask these gentlemen. If there are any questions, please go ahead and ask. I'm sorry, we need a mic.
We see a lot of project managers and construction people doing the job. But at the end of it, when it comes to the final decisions, it is the owner, and it's more on a cost-effective manner and budget. You see, where a project will cost, or equipments for the project will cost a certain amount of money. But at the end of it, I mean, the operator wants a certain quality of products. The owner does not want to give into the product. So how do you manage a situation of that nature?
Essentially, it's all about value. It's not really cost. And that's exactly what you're saying also. You're saying, look, there is a certain expectation and there is a certain cost to that expectation. And again, it goes back also to what Anurag was asking earlier, is that the early planning, has that been planned right? Have those numbers been put together right? And as long as it has, and there is value to what is being done, I don't think it's the cost aspect really. I mean, there are projects, there are certain instances where there is a lot of pressure on the decision maker also, who's the client. You say, look, there's such a huge gap here. Why don't we consider this? And there may be other reasons outside of the fact of just pure cost of certain things. Why a certain element, let's say for example, kitchen equipment, will cost so much less with one vendor as opposed to someone else. Maybe overstocked, maybe whatever. And if you evaluate that correctly, I think then you provide the advice to give the best advice to the client.
And also, if I just add to that, the disagreements between the owner and the operator, it does not come from whatever was agreed initially. Because if there is a disagreement with what the operator wants initially and what the owner can give, then the project will not go ahead, right? Yeah. So the problems come when the operator comes at a later stage and asks for something else, like a variation. That's when the issue comes.
Yeah.
And that's going back to what we were talking about earlier, is that all the stakeholders need to be there as early as possible in the game.
Well, I think operators are becoming a lot more flexible now. It's a positive thing to hear. I think owners are I think designers are a lot more pragmatic about what they put forward for each market. You understand your customer base, you're designing for that customer base. So I think in general, the design philosophies behind the way we put together hotels has been evolving. Many of the hotels that we do, we are seeing this change coming about, a more owner-centric approach to how operators work with the clients. That makes our lives a lot more easier. It allows us to be a lot more creative in how we approach design. We do projects from the really upscale luxury to the mid-scale, and we are cognizant of budgets. and working towards those budgets and really helping clients with even procurement methods throughout, and that cycle changes throughout the design process. So I think what you said is really, really valid and important, but I think we have adapted to that.
So I think, just to sum it up, what essentially you're saying is bring all the stakeholders into the project as early as possible. And I say stakeholders, which is operator, designers, and everyone else, bring them up as early as possible, and the right stakeholders, the right decision makers who will be able to make the right decisions.
And fix it.
Sorry?
And then freeze it.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then, then trust them, empower them to take their advice when they provide their advice, and just follow it through on that.
Yeah, not blindly. I mean,
Sure.
certainly there's an onus of responsibility on everybody to meet the expectations of the investor. And you have formats to do that, go back, report in certain format or whatever. Not just blind trust and say, look, you do it, whatever, and give me the keys.
Yeah. No, and bring them up front, align them, and then empower them.
Absolutely.
Yes. That's good. Look, time's up, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much. Actually, just one quick question from me. We've seen a lot of great design coming into the marketplace. Where I come from, you've seen the, be it the Hoxtons, the 24 Hours, the Generators, the Meiningers, the Citizen M's coming in. How would you, particularly you, Rengy, on this hotel here, what would you do with the bedroom stock? With the bedroom stock at the Hilton? Free advice.
It needs to be more in line with, I think, current market trends. I think you're getting a lot of international tourists coming. They're expecting a lot more. If we're embracing a combination of both business travel and leisure travel, so you need to find a way to keep, bring in the leisure travel, which I think is a big part, which is families, wherever they are, India or beyond. Right now, it's somewhere in between. It's really not.
So you don't think this style will come back into fashion? You don't think the existing style, the old style,
the classical style,
might come back into fashion if we wait long enough.
I think the brand, the brand direction for the product is.
I think it'll fall apart if you wait any longer. I think as part of the team that's involved in this project, in the upgrading of this, and there's a lot of thought having been gone into it, and I think there are a lot of limitations in what you can do structurally, but I think from an interior standpoint and from a decorative standpoint, from a comfort standpoint, they're going to be doing everything they can to get this place up.
No, exactly. And I think they've done a great job with the public area space as well. So anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great finale for this conference. Anurag, thank you so much for moderating. Thank you so much. Excellent.
Thank you, John.
I hope to stay for lunch.
Absolutely.